had all of it.
Haven't been in this in 20 years, man.
You got a tape recorder? A cassette player?
Get it.
Yeah, but it's
this-
for that. I got this.
Will it fit that?
Y'all know some of these people. Look at Ron Ruiz.
JFK.
This is when Danny Bakewell, All City. Here you go, Lambert.
Danny's in that?
You Danny.
Danny and I grew up as neighbors on Press Street.
There you go.
There's Danny.
There's Danny. And there's Ron Ruiz up there.
Oh my God, look at him. Look at Danny. We was All City. He went from Press Street to Wall
Solney.
Street.
You knew some of these women in this court, man.
Why would you call them women, Dad? Those young ladies.
Young lady. Yeah, let's see. That's Steve Barber. He teaches at Southern Law School. That's Danny again.
That's Danny again. Emil Labat.
Emil Labat. Yeah. Let's see what else we got. Michael Solney. You knew Michael Solney, I know, right?
Yeah, I knew sister. Ann Francis Solomon.
That's 63.
Where's Michael?
Where's he now?
I think he's in California. But I was looking for the one with your relative.
Brother Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Danny again. Well, Danny and Emil Labat.
You remember Jalute?
He had a
Must
good,
have been the best team they had. It's saying,
had a good president.
State championship. that
good
year.
president.
Let's see. Randy Moret, he died. I don't know if you guys remember him. Let's see.
Father Verrett.
That's Father Verrett and Harold Jaluk.
What you do? Where's you do?
There's a Jaluk playing ball now for St. I read his name in the paper.
One in here where we ought to have Big Butch here, man. Butch,
The doctor?
Dr. Laurent. All kinds of stuff in here. I don't know.
Okay.
What are we gonna do? What's the deal?
I think we're all gonna sit down.
Hold on a second, please.
Don't do it yet.
Okay.
Okay, can you explain what these are?
Part of many of our campaigns consisted of radio spots run on primarily black radio. But the vast bulk of them were straight endorsement spots. But a few of them were humorous radio cartoon spots. And these go back to a governor's race. Do I have a date on there?
79.
The 79 governor's race,
October 79. First primary.
in which, let's see,
Louis Lambert.
we were with Louis Lambert, that's right.
Okay.
Jimmy Fitzmaurice was running for governor. Dave Treen was running. Paul Hardy was running for governor. One of these spots is a Fitzmaurice spot. One of them is a Paul Hardy spot. Now, Fitzmaurice was notorious as an elected official for cutting ribbons. All you had to say was you could have a housewarming party. Fitz would come to cut a ribbon. Any event, he'd show up with his scissors to cut a ribbon. So this particular spot makes fun of his ribbon cutting propensity. Paul Hardy, who was very, very much a Cajun and made a big deal out of his Cajun heritage as part of his campaign. He is now lieutenant governor. This time he's running for governor. Unfortunately, Paul had a reputation for not being too swift, which I think was undeserved. It's just the way he carried himself more than anything else, but that was the image people had. So we took advantage of that image in the cartoon for him. And I don't know who the third one's for.
This is against them in favor of Lambert, who's your candidate.
Right.
You just lost
Right.
500 jobs.
You trying to tell me how to...
Back to the start. That's enough. That's more than enough. The first one is a Fitzmaurice spot. We are cutting ribbons.
Jimmy, what on earth are you doing?
Anybody can see I'm cutting a ribbon.
But Jimmy, this factory isn't opening. It just closed.
It's a black ribbon.
Jimmy, we just lost 500 jobs.
You trying to tell me how to cut ribbons? Nobody tells Jimmy Fitz how to cut ribbons.
Jimmy, that's not the point.
Look at this. I can cut ribbons holding my hand behind my back. Can you do that?
Come on, Jimmy.
It's really all on the wrist, you know. I've been thinking of trying them on paper. They tell me dolls are pretty easy.
For Pete's sake, Jimmy.
We agree. When it comes to cutting ribbons, Jimmy Fitzmaurice is in a class by himself. The problem is, while Jimmy's been attracting businesses that hardly employ anyone, we're losing businesses that do. We need a man that really understands the job market. and will use the office of governor to attract meaningful jobs to this state. We need Louis Lambert. Elect Lambert, governor, paid for by a coup.
This must be hardest.
Party spot, tape 96.
All right, Paul. Easy, baby. Take it from the top.
I can guarantee you, I'm not afraid of Victor Busey. I got good news for the bad teachers.
Cut. Wrong spot, Paul, baby. Relax. Try it again.
Tape 97.
I can guarantee you, Victor Busey don't frighten me. When I'm governor, I'm gonna whip him.
Cut.
Oh, wait, who let Victor Busey in the studio?
I'm heading with you, Hardy. Trying to make me an issue. Let's see what you're gonna do now.
Hey, wait, somebody grab Busey. How do I get out of here?
You might ask yourselves what this has to do with the governor's race. You're right. Absolutely nothing. When you don't have a record, divert their attention with a phony issue. Who cares about Paul Hardy and Vic Busey? We want a man who understands energy and education, a man who knows the big issues, a man like Louis Lambert. Elect Lambert, governor.
Paid for by a coup.
We're here today in Sugar Swamp for an interview with Paul Hardy, candidate for governor, and his father. Paul, could you pull the pirogue just a little closer?
Oh, you all right?
Paul, I don't know why you want to use the pirogue. You never could handle one.
I'm sorry, Papa.
These mosquitoes been eating me alive. You don't want hunting me small. What you want to do this for now?
I'm running for governor now, Papa.
I don't know why you just don't run on your record.
That's the problem, Papa. You know I don't have a record. If I wasn't pretty and didn't speak French, I wouldn't even be in a race.
Get me out of this water, Paul.
Papa, I'm nobody's son but yours.
Paul Moisés, please don't remind me.
Paul Hardy is all wet. Fortunately for us, the governor's office is not a joke. It requires a man of substance and proven ability. Louis Lambert is such a man. Vote for Lambert on October 27th.
Paid for by a coup.
Bella's there, the governor.
Now, we
I'm a football now.
Yeah, I was a straight guy.
Now, you got Lambert, you decided to support Lambert, and so you would go off and do those commercials without coordinating necessarily with the Lambert campaign.
Oh, no coordination at all.
No. We ran our own campaign. It's cool. Either one of the endorsement or you don't. You get whatever comes out.
There is one classic commercial that we have to talk about. It goes back to 1971.
The original,
The rat
Cameron's race.
The rat convention.
Yeah.
The rat convention.
Can you start that over again, Lars?
Wow.
Yeah, why don't we all get,
For the campaigns,
You said it again, sorry.
we would produce newsletters for the campaigns, and some of our prominent people, this one is from 1983, but it goes back a long way. We supported Edwin Edwards, but some of them become very prominent. This is Kern Reese without a haircut, the chairman of the RTA, 1970 St. Augustine graduate. This is Louis Charbonnet, who is a St. Augustine graduate. We endorsed the legislation.
Louis was in the organization now.
Wow.
He was in and out.
We were trying to help him be reelected.
It was like one of those shotgun weddings.
And, there's some famous people that were involved in coup politics that were not St. Augustine graduates, but were tied to us. Nick Connor, who served in the legislature and who's still at St. Augustine.
As a professor and coach.
Right. And Ivan Lamel, who serves now as a federal magistrate in New Orleans.
Bob Collins.
And I'm going to get to that, in a second. This is this invitation is really quite significant because of the work it took on this man's part to get this invitation out. Robert Collins became the first black federal judge in 1978 in the history of the Deep South, and it's because of the combined efforts of Hank Braden and Sidney Bartholomew and Lambert Boissier and others, Russell Long, Benny Johnston, Lindy Boggs, that he was able to do that. So for this invitation to go out, about 10 years of hard work went into Judge Collins becoming the judge, and now he's in line to become the chief judge on that district. I think he's about two spots away.
Yeah, and the guy ahead of him could take senior status at any time, which would make Bob.
This is one of your original campaign calls.
Yeah. During that campaign, I built this house. I was running from the headquarters to this house,
That's right.
and working at the Urban League.
But wild campaign.
Yeah.
But one of the key things is that we would produce our own literature like this to introduce Hank Braden to the public. He was on the executive committee of the Democratic Party at that time. And we would also produce the various newsletters which outlined the candidates that who endorsed and why. This one talks about Senator Bartholomew's trip to China. And it also endorsed Rick Connery, who was running for Congress then.
What happened to Rick Connery?
And Leroy Hartley.
He got involved with bingo.
You ran into a few.
He became an Indian. These are some early pictures of Sidney Bartholomew and Nick Connor,
Monk Dupree.
Monk Dupree, and
They're all St. Dog folks.
yes, they are.
Yeah, what do you all have in common? You know, you all came up in certain situations. Explain that.
Well, we all went to St. Aug. I came from 5th, 6th Ward area, St. Peter Claver School, where I was an altar boy until I was old enough to be a priest.
Oh.
And then went to St. Aug. I got a scholarship. I had a choice of getting a 4-year scholarship to go to Xavier Prep or a 1-year scholarship to go to St. Aug. So I took the 1-year scholarship to St. Aug. And reunited my
Tell how
friendship
much
with Hank.
tuition was that?
Oh, about 10, 12, $7 a month. $7 a month. So that was,
63.
you know, I threw away 3 years, you know. 300, blew it. Could have went to prep and had a 4-year scholarship. No telling where I'd be now if I went to prep. But that's where I met Hank again, and Paul, and Danielle, and all those other
Herbert
guys.
Cade.
Herbert Cade, yeah.
Who else?
Louis Gerdes.
Louis Gerdes.
Yeah. Our class was
Dennis Donnell.
Dennis Donnell, Louis Gerdes, Rigo, Warren McKenna, Charlie Cotton.
For people that don't know anything at all about New Orleans,
Well, it was Catholic. It was Catholic elementary school to Catholic high school. I was an altar boy. I think you probably were an altar boy.
They never
You
let
didn't quite
me
make
in.
it. Well, some of us should. And I learned the Mass in Latin. I think that's the only way I know the Mass now is in Latin. But, and we all played ball in elementary school, basketball. We used to play against Epiphany and Corpus Christi and all that. And then went to St. Aug, and we all, you know, came to be better friends at St. Aug. Then from St. Aug, we got involved with politics.
The poignant thing about St. Augustine is that it represented a sacrifice on the part of our parents. And immediately after World War II, the Archdiocese decided that there was a need for a high school to accommodate young black men downtown. Actually, they were going to do 2 high schools. I think De La Salle was the other to accommodate young white men uptown. And my mother told me that she contributed, I guess over a period of 2 years, $500 as a member of St. Catherine's Church on Tulane Avenue toward the construction of St. Augustine High School. I would suspect that the parents of these men did the same thing because that's how it got financed originally.
School enjoyed tremendous community support, as a matter of fact.
After World War II.
I don't think London Avenue would have been paved
No.
Had it not been for
had St. Augustine's not been on it.
London Avenue was a canal. We had drainage canals.
well, for a lot of folks, I think one of the areas we want to get into is just what.
Once in a while.
Utah. Yeah. Utah, I think you might find some differences.
So, where did you all go to high school? And what is it? What do we find about St. August unique in terms of politics in New Orleans today?
Well, obviously, we all went to St. Augustine's. Lambert and I graduated the same year, 61. Darrell, you were 63?
65.
65, okay, 4 years behind us. At the time we went to high school, our parents were obviously interested in us going to a Catholic high school. They had two choices. One being Xavier Prep, which was a co-ed facility in uptown New Orleans, which had been around for years and years and years and years. And St. Augustine's, which was relatively new at the time. St. Aug had only been open since 51. And we didn't graduate until 61, so.
And then 57.
And obviously, the school had a very tremendous impact on all of us, both in terms of setting goals for some people that never ever thought of goals being set that high, in terms of developing a community consciousness of events and of people who were perhaps less fortunate, and the relative plight of blacks in the city compared to what it should have been. I think the school opened a lot of eyes to a lot of that.
Well, indirectly, when, you know, St. Aug, I guess relatively short period of time became one of the better football teams. And I can remember my older cousin being on the first team. And the mere fact that they were starting to play, you know, the bigger schools, and then got into at that time you had a Catholic, I guess, division of high school football versus the public school system. And then started playing the other schools, Jesuit.
They
But
didn't do
that was
long
later.
after we graduated.
They had the old
Prep, it was Xavier Prep, St. Aug.
and they were lumped in with the black public schools, and it was the old
SEE, right,
something
that's
like
right.
that.
They were playing
And
35.
you weren't allowed to play the white schools until 1967. I remember
That's right,
once,
but prior to
well after we graduated.
That's right.
But the key thing, St. Augustine was different in the years that these men were there than it was when I was there in the mid-60s. By the time we graduated in 1965, the world had started to change more than it had during the period they were there. The Civil Rights Bill was signed while I was at St. Augustine High School. John Kennedy was shot a year earlier. The Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. The problems that had been delayed in the 1950s came full circle in the 1960s. And what happened is the school reacted. I remember there was a very active group of students in the school who worked with what was called the Negro Betterment Council during the early 60s. We were involved in just things that hadn't been allowed to be done before, helping plan the strategy for sit-ins and restaurants that were not accommodating blacks. And then in 1964, when the Civil Rights Bill was signed, all of that changed. Public accommodations became more normal for blacks. But in 1965, it's interesting, the first black students from St. Augustine High School went to Tulane University. And previously, only one black student, I think in 1964 was the year that Tulane integrated at the undergraduate level. And one of their first black students was Edwin Lombard, who was a graduate of Xavier Prep, now the clerk of court. But we had an article written about our class in 1965. Quite a few of our people won scholarships to Ivy League schools. Some became very famous. Some became infamous. But 1965 was a great year to graduate from high school because it was after the Civil Rights Bill had been passed. We were about to pass the Voting Rights Act, and we, I think, got more benefits as a class than earlier classes had gotten. And after we finished, the classes in the late 60s got even more benefits because those people went on to more Ivy League schools. I mean, I can name you at least 7 or 8 lawyers in this city right now who went to Yale and Harvard in the late 60s from St. Augustine High School.
I remember in '61, Father Berrigan, Philip Berrigan, that was involved.
Right.
He and his brother,
Right,
two Berrigan
in the
brothers,
protests.
involved in protests. Philip Berrigan was my consul at St. Aug. He
was
taught
mine
religion,
as well.
taught English, and
Right.
he tried to get me to go to Holy Cross College in Boston.
Right.
but I don't remember him. And Phil, if you see this, I apologize, but I don't remember Phil thoroughly explaining to me what the scholarships could have been and work study programs and all. All I looked at was going to Boston in '61 with I think a $3,000 to $5,000 a year, semester cost, and knowing my parents couldn't afford it, and passed it up. Didn't go to Boston.
I think that when you finished and when Hank finished in 1961, the Catholic schools were open to black students in other parts of the country.
Right, that's right.
The private schools in the South, like Tulane and Emory and Duke, were not open. And probably, when you think about it for a minute, the better schools, the more prestigious Ivy League schools, were probably not that much open either.
Right. That's why we went to,
the Catholic schools.
Pushed to Notre Dame, Persephone.
Lemoyne.
Yeah.
Why St. Aug? I mean, why, granted you guys were a couple of years apart, right? But what happened in New Orleans that sort of created this whole?
Well, St. Aug, as I was saying earlier, I just missed a few years in integration, but the football team was very important. And you started building up that rivalry between Xavier and Prep, and the students, we just said, well, I want to go to St. Aug, I want to go to St. Aug. And the band was a big thing.
Big draw.
Big draw. And then the best educational programs around. I mean, the students were starting to excel. And at that time, you didn't have the choices. I mean, either that or you go to public school. You had Xavier Prep, or you go to public school system. And,
there was
I think the Catholic upbringing, and
that helped.
The nuns, the priests were all kind of pushing you to Xavier and to St. Aug. And then, as a male, you want to go to St. Aug. So we all just started going in, and with the priests, with their guidance and all, it just made it, I guess, by kept picking up the better students from all parts of the city.
Oh,
Well, St. Augustine got the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
And then the things that distinguished the school were the level of instruction and the discipline in the school. I'll tell you a story, just real brief. I remember in 1963, I was a sophomore, and we had a study period every day. And for some reason, somebody cracked a joke in the study period, and everybody laughed. There were about 30 of us in the class. The assistant football coach then happened to be passing. His name was Otis Washington. He was a new young member of the faculty. Well, they let us know in a very, very profound way that we were not to laugh and only to study in study period. He lined up everybody, gave us 3 licks with the paddle apiece. Nobody laughed for the remainder of the year in study period. And I know that happened when
the paddle
these men
was,
were
It
there.
was rather draconian. I don't think the school, and I know the school doesn't exercise the same kind of discipline today that it
Well,
did.
I don't think
But no other school in the country does anymore either. Such a thing as lawsuits and.
We've got these lists of people over here from both your classes. Can we pull them both out? And can you guys?
Want to go over some of them?
65 one over here?
60.
You've got your class one here as well, 63. Can we open them both up and sit over here? You guys go through the list and hold on one second. Let's get before you guys start saying anything. Let's get the.
I don't know many people in Sydney's class.
The box. It was right here last time I saw
60. Father Rook was principal. And let's see who we can see that's
You can
politically.
turn it around for the camera.
Well,
it's all right.
We already shot this. This is just.
Okay. All right, we'll go through the political people first, right?
There are not many
Just
political people
Bethal
in that class.
in that class.
well, then why don't we do your class?
Let's see. Let's make sure. I don't see anyone else, Hank.
No, I'm telling you, it's not a very political class.
Yeah.
Our class had all the politicians for the most part.
I see some other guys, Father.
I see a whole pile of
Norrie Smith, Albert
Crawford
Porsche,
Spooner.
Dennis.
Oh my God. Joe
His Tommy Thibodeau, that's Sidney's brother-in-law.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were in the same class.
I didn't either. Jeremy, I saw Gerald last night,
Johnson.
Gerald Merrick. Larry, Mike Levine, Dr. Levine.
Right.
That's Sidney's good friend, Joe Harden, Dr. Harden. Muscles Harrison.
But these guys were not
Not involved. That's Halloween, play a little football. Okay, 61. Okay, that's the 61. We go down the first row. All right. Paul Boyer hasn't run for office, but he's politically involved with a public relations firm. Then it's myself and Hank. We sat in the same seating for 4 years. Huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sat me. I made the mistake one day of telling some reporter that I knew the back of Lambert's head better than his mother. Better than his mother. I said, they asked us how well we knew each other. His mother jumped all over me a few days later.
Who else made was political? Okay.
Oh, Herbert Cade has been an appellate court
Herbert Cade,
judge. Dennis Dennell is a sitting...
Sherman Copeland, state representative.
State representative in...
Charlie Cotton was a civil rights attorney, won a few cases. His Judge Dennell, Dennis Dennell. Ed Davis, who else we got named? DeMouse, yeah.
Politics.
Hilliard Fazan, attorney. He didn't run for office, so he got involved a little. Louis Gerdes, he's not, he didn't run for office, but I know he's been mentioned a number of times.
He's run once. He ran for juvenile court once.
Juvenile court, okay. Charlie Hatfield's with the school system. Somebody tell Elaine to be quiet.
So,
Just been fussing with myself. Emmett Moulton. Remember Moulton? He went on to work in Detroit.
now running Detroit.
Black Coleman.
Emmett Moulton is now the vice president for development of the third largest pizza company in the country. He left Coleman Young.
He worked with Coleman about 8 years, huh?
Yeah.
He worked under Dutch Morial. Worked under Moon Landrieu first.
Right.
Then went on, no, he didn't work under Dutch. I think Dutch, he left Dutch to go work for Coleman Young.
Edwin Rigo.
Yeah, that's right.
Very prominent executive with Procter & Gamble.
And I was trying to remember if he ran for mayor of the little town outside of Cincinnati. Carl Thomas. Carl's with Lemoyne, right? He went to school with you at Lemoyne.
That's right.
And then became a dean of men or something at Lemoyne College.
Dean of students.
You know, I think that's all the politicians out of this class.
Did y'all feel you were being groomed for, for something higher, for higher office when you were at St. Louis?
Not necessarily for political purposes, but you knew you were being prepared for something else.
I think school was very interested in developing leadership at all levels, not just political leadership. I think I was in a prior conversation. I remind you guys of something. Philip Berrigan formed a bis secularis sodality at St. Augustine's, the membership of which was not optional. No one ever volunteered to join the sodality. They were appointed, and no refusals were tolerated. I remember I refused to go to the first meeting that he called. He called my father that night, and I was at the next meeting the next day. But that particular bis secularis sodality is a very structured, strict sodality that has as its purpose social change, social embetterment anyhow. Projects that Berrigan imposed upon this sodality included feeding the St. Bernard Project and feeding half the elderly population in the 7th Ward for Thanksgiving and Christmas with baskets and all sorts of other things. But it didn't dawn on me until many years later that at this particular point in time, the society, the city of New Orleans was very, very segregated. Yet this particular sodality maintained affiliations with all other bis secularis sodalities in the city at the time, and all of the white high schools had these things, Catholic high schools, male and female, because even then most of the Catholic high schools were either all male or all female. They were very...
The only exception being that we could think of Xavier Prep.
Xavier
Black
Prep.
community.
Yeah, all the rest of them were
In the
segregated.
white community, they were all segregated.
But the sodality had official interchanges with all the rest of the schools, and Berrigan designated different people to represent St. Aug to the other sodalities, and it was really the only athletics were totally segregated, the entire system was totally segregated, so the only real interaction was through this sodality structure. That didn't dawn on me until many years after I graduated, what he was trying to do.
Yeah, we didn't really always knew what their intentions were. We just were put in certain places and performed.
But did you all know that you were did you start getting interested in politics in high school, or was that
I
later?
think Hank was more involved in politics than, let's say, myself. I didn't really start getting involved politically until much later.
We had a few faculty members who were very heavily engaged politically, the most outstanding being McManus,
McManus, I remember Mac, yeah.
who is now Superior General, is he now?
I think he is of
Of the Josephite Order.
If he isn't Superior General, he just completed a term, and he's been.
And it was in that large race, I remember that was
Father
kind of
Philip
important.
Barragan.
Was it Ortiq or Dutch's race at large? They got us involved. You had to vote for two. Anyway, I remember him trying
It
to
was
explain.
an old race where Revius Ortiq ran for state representative.
Okay.
Because the at-large race wasn't until 1969. Revius Ortiq ran in 1963 for state representative from the
I remember
7th Ward.
Ortiq.
And at that time, you didn't have single-member districts. There were 4 representatives from the 7th Ward, and he was trying to become one of those 4.
I remember McManus, the first race I was really familiar with was one McManus. It was a charter change, excuse me, a charter change election that Shep Morrison had trying to, you remember Shep had the charter change to put two-term limitation on the mayor's office, and then decided at a later date to undo that charter change. McManus was very, very much opposed to changing it.
School, it's you know, some of the best students in the city of New Orleans for a number of reasons that you've gone into, and then all of a sudden, 10 years later, you have this wave of people involved in New Orleans politics. How did this happen?
Well, again, you had the cream of the crop. And then we all knew one another, so as things became available, we said, well, so-and-so could do that. And, he's a good guy, we could put him there, and he just started coming out of that process.
We had a large number of lawyers, for one thing, who obviously lend themselves readily to public life. You had graduated from college in '65, the same year the Voting Rights Act was passed. So shortly thereafter, shortly within a few years, the Supreme Court rendered its one man, one vote decision, which forced the reapportionment of legislative bodies all over the country.
Now, this thing doesn't happen in a vacuum. People get together in some way. How did you all get together? How did St. Paul graduates?
Well, I guess you better go to the coup. I guess the formation of coup.
Sure.
The political groups, coup and Soul were the two that started.
Coup and Soul were and Bold were all started roughly at the same time. Designed to take advantage of the political opportunities that by then were available. And as is the case in the formulation of most groups, people tend to associate with people that they know, have known. And in our case, most of us had known each other, at least the common meeting ground was St. Augustine's High School, at least for the downtown.
I was about to say, why don't you explain the difference with coup, Soul, and Bold?
There were 3 large concentrations of black voters in the city of New Orleans, the oldest concentration being uptown New Orleans, in what is now really Central City more than anything else. It had a large number of registered black voters that had been organized according to church lines, Baptist churches primarily. But it was totally fragmented because each minister went his own way, etc. So there was a need uptown for some sort of unifying operation involving young people that weren't traditionally involved in the church politics. So there was a prominent black law firm in existence at the time by the name of Collins, Douglas, and Eli. Bob Collins being the black federal judge that we were discussing earlier. But they decided that new political groups should be formulated. And it was basically through their efforts, at least on the creative end of it, that a new group was installed uptown named Bold. Our group was formulated downtown. Community Organization for Urban Politics, COO. And the third concentration was in the 9th Ward, which is the city's biggest ward. And we had Nils Douglas of that firm being the first president of the Southern Organization for Unified Leadership, SOUL.
Right.
And Nils ran for some office.
Well, Sol developed out of his race for state representative in 1960.
Because I remember I was in the future.
For instance, in the 9th Ward, there were 2 target areas for federal money, the Lower 9th Ward and Desire area. And in Central City, that was a target area. So Bold was an outgrowth of people who were involved as well in the war on poverty. Oretha Haley, Bill Roussel, Jim Singleton, those people were all at one point employed by Total Community Action. By the same token, in our group, many of our members were former TCA employees as well. Sidney Bartholomew, Hank Braden, but we did not have a target area in the 6th and 7th Ward area. Later, a satellite area was developed in the St. Bernard Housing Project.
Would you agree that COO, though, also had, I realize that all these groups are sort of neighborhood-based, but there seems like there is much more of a strong organizational tie in terms of the backgrounds of the folks, where they came from, what they knew. What was that tie in COO?
St. Augustine High School. That's why everything's purple and gold. St. Augustine High School.
St. Augustine High School. And then we went more Urban League. We went to the Urban League.
The Urban League.
Involved in the Urban League.
But there's something else too, and it's in our case. I grew up to find out. I didn't know these men until the late '60s, early '70s. I found out since then that our parents grew up together. Right. Many of our parents grew up together, and lost touch over the years. And now we're friends. I mean, my father grew up with this man's mother and his father and mother, so that sort of helps as well. I remember being at a wedding with you in 1974. It must have been Paul Valto's wedding where I stood in the wedding, and your mother came up and introduced herself to me. I had never met her before, but she knew exactly who I was. So the old family relationships sort of buttressed exactly what we were about as we came out of school.
Very true.
Darryl, we haven't looked at your class. Can you go through real quickly and guess the people that you know
We have
in
some
politics, who they are, and
famous
what they do
people. Here, infamous. Let me start off with one of the most infamous people in our class, Robert Peter Alston, who was president of the Republic Bank here. He's a lawyer, a brilliant young man. He got a scholarship to Boston University and then went to Harvard Law School, and for a time headed the Republic National Bank here. He's become since a successful entrepreneur in Chicago, owning the Popeyes franchises up there and several other things. Danny Bakewell, who I will let Mr. Boissier talk about for a minute.
Danny and I grew up...
all-state football player.
Right. We grew up as kids in St. Peter Claver's Parish. We lived on half side of a double house. I lived on one side. He was right almost an arm's length away, living on the other side. And we grew up as kids. They're a few years older than Danny, about 4 years older. And Danny went to St. Aug, became an all-city football player and all. I forget where he went to college.
State. Someplace in California.
Yeah, and then decided to move to California, where he got involved with a program. He started Brotherhood Crusade, which is something akin to a Black United Fund. And as a result of that, got involved with community efforts out there, and then in business. And later on, purchased stock in a bond firm, a brokerage house. And we tease him now, saying that he went from Prayer Street to Wall Street. But Dan has been quite successful financially, very successful financially. He's probably has a lot of national behind-the-scenes kind of politics. He knows every black mayor in the country that's been elected, closely working with Jesse Jackson. He's heading up some programs now in California, anti-drug programs, taking neighborhood back kind of efforts.
In fact, a few weeks ago, he was on Oprah.
He's right.
One afternoon talking about this anti-drug program nationally. Then we've got Steve Barbary, a law professor at Southern Law School. He went to the University of Chicago Law School. Wayne Benjamin is vice president for the Times-Picayune. He's a Loyola MBA.
That's got to be a real aberration.
Yeah. Cornell Chapman's a newscaster in Los Angeles now. Matthew Collins is an attorney here in New Orleans. He went to Yale, and I think he went to Loyola Law School. He works downtown. He's a partner in the firm. Edgar Dappermont, our class valedictorian, is an ophthalmologist now in Biloxi, Mississippi. Ronald Davis, probably the man in the class, the salutatorian, the number 2 man, who had the most promise, died unfortunately 5 years ago in a drowning accident. As I said, he was a brilliant man. He went to Princeton, won a scholarship, and then went to Yale and got a master's and got a law degree at the University of Pennsylvania. I think it's safe to say he'd be a judge today had he lived. He had run for a judgeship and lost.
Darryl, are there elected officials in this class?
Yes, I'm going to get to him. I'll just go down some. Paul Valto at the bottom is an elected official. He's a civil sheriff of the city of New Orleans now. Let's see. Might be the only elected official so far.
No judges?
No, Ron Davis would have been
We
the
got the
judge.
judge. Look, about McConaughey, what year did McConaughey finish?
67.
Okay, because he's a judge.
But we've got others, you know.
Actually, one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't introduced you all. I mean, who are you and what's in each of one of yours?
Henry
involved in
Julian
politics?
would be civil sheriff.
Criminal sheriff.
Criminal sheriff, yeah.
Well, why don't you start with Hank? He's the guy who became elected first.
I was elected along with 2 other blacks, the first 3 blacks elected to the Democratic State Central Committee in Louisiana, which in turn elected me to the Democratic National Committee, which in turn elected me to the Executive Committee of the Democratic National Committee, which I served for 8 years. I was elected to the Louisiana State Senate, which I served for 6.5 years.
Which was the seat held by Sidney Bartholomew, right?
Which would finish the unexpired term of Sidney Bartholomew in the Senate seat, and was reelected in my own right subsequent to that.
And I became elected to the city council in 1981 to fill the unexpired term of Brod Baggett, who ran for public service commissioner, and ran again for re-election in 82 and 86, and I'm presently running for re-election in the 90 election for District D, which comprises parts of the 7th, 8th, and 9th Ward, which is, again, involving St. Aug, because St. Aug sits right in the middle of the district. And I haven't held any other elected positions, but I've been there for 9 years now, and hopefully another 4.
What's your involvement in politics?
Well, I've been involved in coup for about 20 years and served in various administrative jobs. Right now I head the Office of Business and Economic Development, Business and Industrial Development for the city of New Orleans. I've never been elected to anything.
25, 30 years ago, could you all have imagined that you'd be where you are today, you know, sort of in the pinnacle of the government?
No, I was always interested in business, and that was the only shortcoming I saw at St. August as a student, that I couldn't get enough business courses, and didn't think I'd ever get involved with politics. I always liked the business atmosphere. But later on, I was recruited by Hank to come work at the Urban League. And then after working at the Urban League for several years, I was then recruited by, I don't think he would take credit, but between he and Sidney and Ron Naborn, some kind of way, Nick Kahn, I guess.
He was ambushed.
Got recruited for the council race. And if you remember that picture I had when I was in the funeral director's business, I had that large afro and I had a beard because I was working with busting labor unions. We were trying to integrate labor unions, so we had to be a little more radical. And I had to come home and shave and cut my hair and get ready for the TV. My little girl had never, my daughter at the time, had never seen me without a beard. And as I was shaving my beard, she started crying. Told her mother, I'm like Daddy looking like that. But I didn't ever think I'd run for office. Matter of fact, after working in his campaign, I said I would never run for office because it was a tough campaign, and he was running against Louis Charbonnet, who was really a cousin of mine, married my first cousin, so there was some family problems in there, and fighting and infighting. And I said, well, I'd never run for office. It's just too much, you know. And a few years later, said, well, you can throw my name out there and see what happens. And boom, I ran. You know.
But you all seem to really enjoy the political game here. I mean, why is that?
Well, I guess I enjoy it. Keeps me quite busy, and I like to be very busy, get involved with different issues and in and out of various things. I'm not ready to give it up.
Well, it's funny listening to what you're talking about. You're saying that you didn't want to get in the race because of Hank's race, and Louis Charbonnet was somebody who you were close to in terms of family. We were talking to a North Louisiana politician yesterday who was talking about the differences between the quiet politics in North Louisiana and that politics down there. And he goes, boy, it's factionalized down there. I mean, somebody runs and immediately 40% of the people are against him just because they hate him.
Or hate his dad.
That happens.
Or whatever.
Now, I didn't have the problem when I ran. I guess as I was told later on, Dutch Morial at the time thought that it may have been a good way to mend fences with Coup by supporting me. As a matter of fact, I'd fight with Hank and Sidney to even go talk to them, at that time, Mayor Morial, about my race. I didn't ask for the endorsement. Just went in and talked about the fact that if he's chairman of the board for the city and I'm going to be a board member, I thought we ought to discuss the fact that I might be serving on that board, the city council. And didn't ask for an endorsement. I think just wanted to let him know I was running. And later on, he decided to endorse me. And I guess it was an attempt to bridge the gap between his administration and Sidney and Coup. At least I was told that by some of his people later on. But at the time I ran, it was key because it was be the first black to be elected to District D. We had the first black councilman at large, which was Sidney Bartholomew.
I was going to say, the funny thing about it, to me, was I loved it. See, I was a political junkie from day one. And we put this organization together, and everything we did for a few years was a first. Because, there was no real path to follow. We were blazing our own trails. We were a bunch of young crazies who had really nothing to lose and everything to gain. So we, played a very rough and tumble game of politics, and got involved in everything from school board races to parish committee races, state committee races, legislative races, originally supporting other people. Gubernatorial races, mayoralty races, the whole congressional, senatorial, presidential, and all of this was brand new because we had never participated in any of those kinds of campaigns before.
And I don't think any organization has come behind us since.
No.
To achieve the things that we achieved.
And we started running candidates in all of these different races and
knew how to raise money. Remember, the key ingredient was always the ability to raise money.
We always
which brings me to this little thing I have here. I raised $1,000 per table with the 50 mentions at the Blue Room. That was the first.
That's right.
In fundraising. I mean, a district councilman throwing a $500
Sidney Bartholomew had all of his money raised for the councilman at large race before the race started, because all of our guys went on notes with the understanding that if he was successful, we would have some fundraisers to repay them. But if he was not successful, they were going to have to eat that paper. That took a lot of guts for some guys to sign 3,000.
And no other organization has ever been able to top that. I mean, they've run their candidates, they've won, and they've raised their monies, but we came out the box with the money. I mean, we put our money on the table, our money on the line. We got our candidate, we ready to go. Nobody else does it that way. Some of them will get the politics together first, but we'll get the money and the politics.
Are there other organizations? Are there a lot of other organizations?
Well, Soul has always elected their members in the area. Bow has their membership with Jim Singleton, Ken Carter, Johnny
Dawn.
Yeah, Johnny Jackson has his group. Johnny and Soul, I think, put more of the politics together. Coup put the politics and the money together. Bow put the politics and then later put the money together. And I would think right now, both Coup members and Bow members can do both politics and money. Soul, I think, is still stuck to more politics than raising
But there
money.
are hundreds of these organizations.
Yeah, we went around a couple of years ago during the Edwards race, and there was like millions of signs, different stamps.
Yappa, Bears, and Yarn.
Where do these organizations come
Well, they come up, but they're not, as again, we're talking about the first, Coup offered I guess, the class of the race, of the groups. A lot of these groups are more just political, just to get, put the literature out, get a ballot or what have you. We took and developed people and looked at race.
There's a difference between an organization and a handful of people who get together and call themselves an organization. We have a charter, registered charter, bylaws, well-developed over the years, modified, amended, the whole thing. We always conducted it as a real organization. I think the same thing, to a lesser degree, applied to Seoul.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar enough with the BOLD organization to really comment on it. But we had a real, in the technical and legal sense of the term, organization, which operated like one. And enforcing many of those rules was quite difficult. For example, there's a normal tendency sometimes in a major race when an organization arrives at an endorsement for certain people whose candidate did not receive that endorsement to support their candidate anyhow. Well, we had rules saying if you put one of those numbers, you were history, you were out. And we enforced that rule very strictly. That's the real proof of
we've supported some candidates that we didn't originally want, but we stuck with the rules. Would have made a difference in the mass race too with Morial had we not. Remember that we were with Toni Morrison. I think Sidney and Abon were with Dutch, and Harold and those guys were with Kiefer.
That's right.
And we lost out. Morial won after several ballots, so we agreed to support Morial.
That was the end of it.
And help get him elected mayor. Because I think that race was between.
Interestingly enough, we were the only major black political organization that supported Morial in the primary.
Well, we were the first, and that was, Bold endorsed him shortly after.
In the primary?
In the primary. We were the first. There was an article on the
'cause I
front page
remember
of the
so
Picayune
Kiefer.
that we were his first major endorsement in 1977. And later Bold endorsed him. Sol endorsed Kiefer.
We're not gonna get into any specific races. That's some good stuff in terms of where who comes from. Just looking at politics in the city in general, I mean, there are people that think the politics here is unusual, unique. Some people think it's colorful. What is it about New Orleans politics that makes it so different? Or what is New Orleans politics like?
New Orleans politics is like gumbo, and I was amused by what you said a few minutes ago about the upstate person you talked to, trying to define the difference between upstate politics and the truth of the matter is politics anywhere, and there's quite a few colorful political races in upstate Louisiana that I've been familiar with. I remember Representative Shady Wall got in a few interesting races.
Shady Wall.
But the New Orleans frightens upstate politicians, and it frightens them the same way perhaps New York politics would frighten us at this stage of the game. How do you go into New York City and put together a campaign for a citywide office? You just have to think of the magnitude of it. It's got to be mind-boggling when you're dealing with that many millions of people and factions. And well, that's the way New Orleans looks to the average upstate politician. You got almost 600,000 people, a very diverse group at that, living in different neighborhoods with their distinctive characteristics and mores and everything else. And you say, my God, how am I going to go into that city if I'm running for governor? How do I get this city to support me? And the truth of the matter is you can hardly ever get the whole city to support anybody. You just have to figure out what piece of it you naturally appeal to and galvanize that one piece. And to do that, you have to affiliate with locals in some way, shape, or form. And it becomes a very mind-boggling, frustrating, and also generally expensive proposition. We spent money, incidentally, when I ran for the Senate the first time against Louis Charbonnet, we set a new record statewide, and it's a little ironic because you say an all-black race. We spent more money in that race than had ever been spent before in a Senate race in the history of Louisiana.
Over $250,000.
Oh, easily, yeah. Probably closer to over 300
For states.
In 1978.
1978.
In 1978.
And the race was won by how many votes?
14.
14 votes.
Okay, now there's something different happening.
That's about, let's see, about $25,000 voted.
And the fact that you were compelled to invite the Fifth Dimension in to raise big money for a council race. in this
Well, I
city.
spent $175,000 in my first race with the mayor's endorsement, with Morrell's endorsement. But I had a Republican guy I ran against, and I was running in a district that was 50-50, black-white. White turnout was about 8% higher, so I was able to get, I think, 13% of the white vote and 90-something% of the black vote. I won by 1%, but that cost a good $175,000.
Let me tell you a funny race. Sidney Barthelme's first race for the Senate. What year was that?
74.
1974. Special election. The incumbent had taken a judgeship and the seat was open. Sidney ran against, at that time, this was before the open primary law. So you had a Democratic primary, and if necessary, you'd have a Democratic runoff, and then you have a general election. Well, he ran against a young man, a native of the district by the name of Frank Udo, white. The district was approximately 51 or 52% black. Was it that high?
I'm not sure it was that high.
Wines. But Sidney won and was the Democratic nominee. And then in something that was hardly ever heard of, here comes a Republican candidate, Mike Starr, Cosmos Broadcasting.
Some people into New Orleans politics gets kind of rough in a very unique way. I mean, those commercials, I mean, I come from New Jersey. I never heard anything like that on the radio beforehand. And Gar, you said that some of this started with some classic story back in 1971 or something, right?
Well, we were, Hank could probably address that better. We were very opposed to Edwin Edwards being elected governor that year. As a congressman, he had voted against several pieces of legislation, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society legislation in the late 60s. One part of that legislation provided money to cities under the Urban Renewal Act for rat control and for having looked at his record, we were able to determine that this was an issue that might help us with the voters in New Orleans. So with that, I'll let Hank describe what we did.
We did. The truth of the matter is, Edwin Edwards represented a very, very conservative district when he was a congressman. He would not have lasted very long in Congress. He would have been in Jack Kennedy's Profiles in Courage book if he had voted the other way. But the record was the record, and he basically voted against all the civil rights legislation, which didn't really distinguish him from the rest of the congressional delegation, which also voted against all the, well, needless to say, one of his opponents in this race was Gillis Long. Gillis, luckily, was not in office when that legislation was coming down the pike. Otherwise, he may well have been in the same situation Edwin found himself in, but that's neither here nor there. Concerning the rat thing, there were two bills. One bill was a 2-year rat control bill. That's the bill Edwin voted against. There was another bill that was a 1-year bill. Edwin voted for a 1-year bill. But we chose to dwell on the 2-year bill that he voted against. And we did a multimedia attack on the rat thing because we hit him with cartoons. I wish I had some of those cartoons of a rat convention. I hit upon the idea of a rat convention, which named Edwin Edwards Rat's Man of the Year, is what it was. And we had all these little cute rats running around with signs saying "Me for EE" and all this stuff, you know, a proven friend of rats and all this. And we did the cartoon and we had that distributed all over the district. But then we coupled it with a radio commercial, which had this, took you live to this rat convention with all these rats screaming and cheering. And we had a guy introduce him, a rat introduce him as a favorite son, hailing from Crowley, Louisiana, a proven friend of rats, a man among rats, all the foolishness. The Honorable Edwin W. Edwards, he said, the rats really love him. They have reason to. In 19 such and such, Edwin Edwards voted against the rat control bill and all this. Humans on election day vote for Gillis Law or whatever. He, when confronted with the fact that we had made such an issue of it by some reporter, said, well, why did you vote against that bill? Edwin looked at him with a straight face. He said, I have no rats in my district. There was an incumbent criminal sheriff. And criminal sheriffs in Orleans Parish, for the benefit of your audience, run parish prison. And this particular gentleman ran a very sloppy facility. Prisoners escaped every day of the week. One wise guy even put up a sign on the neutral ground between the prison and the other side of the street, slow prisoner crossing. We did a radio commercial where this guy walks up to another guy and asks him for a light, and asks him for some money. He says, well, what do you need money for? He says, I gotta buy some more smack. He said, smack? He said, smack? He says, you mean there's dope in the prison? He'd seen this guy climbing down the wall. He said, sure. He says, if you can afford it. He says, oh, God. He says, well, he says, good luck to you. He says, I hope you get what you're looking for. He says, I'm glad you said that, brother. Stick 'em up. You remember we did? That was when Fody first ran for criminal sheriff. But the long and short of it was we had an absolute field day in every kind of political race you can think of because we had never played in any of them. Right. And there was a short transition in this city between black enfranchisement in '65 and the election of black elected officials. And that was the interim, the transition in which we had our heyday, our field day, because once blacks started becoming elected to various offices, they developed organizations and entities of their own, as did their white predecessors, which minimized then the impact of black political organizations. And we were in that little capsule, and it was a great deal of fun, but I don't think there'll ever be another period quite like that again.
No. Hasn't been a group to come since.
Just can't.
Do you all see yourself, I mean, you obviously know New Orleans politics. What about outside New Orleans, state and national?
Daryl has
Daryl's got to go. Okay.
Yeah.
Just for us.
You got to open to it.
Daryl?
Yeah.
He's really totally out of his depth, and I'm wondering whether there's, are there all these different things here, which set us apart?
I guess we did it all. It's a way of just getting visibility for your candidates, and we've got a tradition of having parades here anyway, so why not have a political parade?
It, in all honesty now, most voters' minds are made up by what they see on television, what they hear on the radio, the mail that they receive. It's always been a known that in a less important contest, a low visibility contest, say a judicial contest, a school board contest, other entities have a greater impact on how the average voter votes in those kinds of contests. When you get to a big contest, a mayor's race, a gubernatorial election, a presidential election, a high-profile contest, everybody becomes an expert themselves. I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for president, because you know who you want to vote for president. You might listen to what I have to say, but you're going to make up your own mind on that. Well, the vast bulk of the elections in any city are low-profile elections. in which outside influences have a great deal more to do with how somebody votes than a high-profile election. So consequently, in those kinds of low-profile races in particular, like this poor guy you're talking about, some obscure North Louisiana candidate for some statewide office that, see, New Orleanians are very provincial people. They think the world starts and ends at the boundaries of New Orleans. They don't generally give that much of a damn about Baton Rouge, Washington, D.C., Paris, France, or anything else. New Orleans is where it starts and New Orleans is where it finishes. So if you want to ingratiate yourself to New Orleanians, you better do as you do in Rome. When you want to get along, you do as New Orleanians do. So you make some of the traditional spectacles. If you're in town for Mardi Gras, you better show up at a few balls and shake a few hands, and you better show up at a few bingo games and contribute to a pot, huh? You better go out to the racetrack and have a couple of beers, eat a few oysters at some of the outstanding oyster establishments, and eat some crawfish and gumbo and everything else that's associated with New Orleans. Our city is so diverse in so many respects that there are different things to do in different parts of town.
In my race, in the second primary against the Republican guy, we looked at the returns in the first, and there were parts of the ninth ward where we had a low turnout. So in the second primary, we got a truck and put a 3-4 piece band together, and we lined up guys with vans, and we put 6 to 8 workers per van, and we went down Claiborne and North Robertson streets, and we put the vans at each corner, and the truck would go to the cross streets. We'd get people out to vote, make a lot of noise, and go over the same area of the Angel School, and put the band in that lot, and had the guys knock around on doors. And when the returns would come in, I remember I was leading Frank Muley by 1,600 votes. But there were 5 precincts that were out in the 8th ward that was mostly conservative people. So I went from a 1,600 vote lead to like 37 vote lead. I mean, just all at one time, just wiping out. And I left to go to the TV station to claim victory. I said, you lead by 37 votes. I said, we got it made. We won with Hank with 14. I said, I got a cushion. And when I came back, that one precinct in the 9th ward had come in, and I led by 200 and some votes, so they gave me an election. But I think the music and getting the people out to vote really helped me.
There's also, I mean, you got commercials for local races. I mean, some statewide races up north, they barely have any commercials for governors.
Oh yeah, I'm already figuring some TV in my budget already.
There are some state senators that have as many as 5 parishes for a constituency. Big geographically, where media is very awkward to buy to cover all 5 parishes. We have a concentrated market, but a plethora of media outlets. We damned if we do and damned if we don't. But I mean, you can't run for a serious legislative race, or councilmanic race, or anything else without television, radio,
and radio,
direct mail, phone bank. I mean, you
got the whole thing.
Politics is far more sophisticated here than it is. But I don't think that's an anomaly. I think in any state that has a big urban area and a large rural area, you'd find the same kind of dichotomy.
But the amount of money that's spent here is legendary.
Yeah.
In other parts of the country, we know that people here just spend an enormous amount of money.
Television's expensive.
It costs a lot of money to run. It just does. I remember at one point in time, some of the newspapers, not the newspaper and some of the underground newspapers, made a big deal about how much money groups were getting in campaigns. And the truth of the matter was, you compare the amount of money a politician spent on groups to the amount of money he spent on television and radio and direct mail, and it really wound up being a drop in the bucket. It wasn't.
Channel 4 has always been like $1,400 a minute, prime time spots. And you got to put a couple of those on in a 6-week, 8-week campaign, so it's expensive.
as far as the groups go, how does that money get spent if you make a donation to the group?
Well, as newspapers that we developed, radio,
on the groups,
ballots,
too.
yeah, well, the groups too.
The sophistication of the group determines,
You workers, you got put workers out on the street every week, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets. And
little,
We visited the Soul headquarters and we saw what was going on there, you know, with
Sherman's
phone banks and all the other kind of stuff. And, I mean, it seemed to me that anybody, if I was running for office and I said, I want that kind of support in that community, then I give, you know, Sherman Copeland X number of dollars, and I've got the sole endorsement. He's gonna put out the workers for me. Is that how it works?
well, almost, except in this respect. Usually, it's always been illegal to sell an organization, to sell a vote. We had organizations in this neck of the woods compared to what they call drivers in upstate Louisiana, where the polling places are far apart and they hire these guys to pick up people and drive them to the polling place and drive them back home. Well, we do some of that in New Orleans, but that's nothing compared to the other activities that sophisticated groups basically conducted. And in major races, endorsements were made first, because any candidate that you would endorse would be expected to pay his or her pro rata share of the campaign. And I remember at one time, Seoul had such a mammoth operation. They had their own building, do you recall?
yeah, and they were good at what they did, and they're part of the city. I mean, you wouldn't want to go against them. I mean, we wouldn't go in their territory to try and compete against them. We'd offer the precincts that we thought we were strong in, and that's what we would do. And you didn't want to go heads up against Seoul. So, you know, Seoul was able to put together the troops that you needed, and I guess that's why their cost for the organizational support was very expensive.
We used to always laugh at some of the groups, and the politicians, of course, always told stories. Say, well, what area does your group cover? We citywide.
Yeah. We put a poster on Canal in Cleveland, we'll put one on Cleveland and Catherine. Call my aunt uptown, and, you know, phone back up. We didn't do that, we stuck to our area.
We stuck to our precincts specifically, and we were responsible for those precincts for 6 weeks out of the election and definitely on election day.
Now, we have done some citywide balloting. We'll mail a ballot out, you know, if it's a citywide race, but we don't usually go beyond our.
Well, you all are specific, and that's why you're successful. There's just a lot of groups that appear to be, let's say, marginal, but they're out there.
Right.
With the, you know, election.
Look, I've won, I took his quote when we won, you know, we win the big ones, we just don't know how to win them big. When you win by, you know, 14 votes, when you win by 250 votes, when you win by 101 votes, every vote does count. And you don't want to leave any organization out if you run those kind of races. So you have to pick them up whether you like it or not.
I just figured that, you know, these political organizations basically get together to support candidates who they support, people who are, you know, have common ideas and common beliefs with them. But it just seems that I've seen in some organizations where it seems like they're more into the business of politics, of the making money in the business of supporting candidates.
Well, somewhat like that,
necessarily
I
what
guess.
the candidates stand for.
I guess some groups might be like that, but for the most part, we try to pick the
And
ones we consider most liberal, and you know, we do the things we want to
Not
implement.
only that, though, as I said earlier now, those little groups can give you some street presence. How many votes they actually influence, anybody's guess. The vast bulk of a candidate's money will go into television, radio, direct mail, in a phone bank. And as I also said earlier, there was a hiatus. There was a short period of time, at least in black politics, where there was a vacuum because there were seats up for grabs in majority black districts that were eventually going to be filled by black politicians, black elected officials, but they hadn't been yet. And that period was roughly between 65 and 72, 73, right around, because the governor's race in 71 was the first one that had single member districts in the House of Representatives and the rest of the stuff. As soon as you started electing black office holders, that era came really to an end, because elected officials have their own organizations, their own networks, their own everything else. So the influence of groups has been diminished very, very considerably. So what we're talking about now really is more historical almost than it is.
But it seems though that even today, maybe this kind of king-making may not be quite as it was, but it does mean that in the community there's an enormous interest and activity when political races come around. Everyone takes a side.
Yeah.
Sure. It was a big industry in New Orleans, in the black community. A lot of money floating around during certain times of the year. Kids got employed to distribute leaflets.
15, 20 bucks, 25 bucks a day is not bad for leaflets.
Nice work for a high school kid to pick up. I was going to say one other thing now too. Most organizations identify it with their own elected officials. So now when you're talking to a group for an endorsement, one of the caveats is, not necessarily so, but one of the caveats is, well, if I get a Bold endorsement, chances are I will get Assessor Ken Carter's endorsement. Chances are I will get Councilman Singleton's endorsement. If I get a Dawn endorsement, chances are I will get Johnny Jackson endorsement. So now it's, in that sense, it's considerably different.
We don't do that in Coop.
No.
I don't necessarily endorse the same candidates that Coop might endorse.
Well, neither does the mayor anymore.
Well, in New Orleans' personality, I mean, you were talking about, you endorsed the most liberal candidate, but some people would say there were not a whole lot of ideological differences.
No, not
I'm talking about historically.
Historically. In a governor's race, obviously, the fact that Edwin Edwards had voted against all those bills put him in a very difficult posture with us.
But what about in the city when there are races? Is there more of a personality clash? I'm with this guy or I'm with this person or whatever in sorts of politics?
I don't really understand your
Well, I
question.
mean, it's that, a lot of places, you got the Republicans and Democrats in the city council. There's a real ideological difference between them, and I can't support him because he's a Republican. I can't support him because he's right to life, and But New Orleans, it's not so much. It doesn't seem. It's less issues and more like how people have related to each other for some time. And the fact
That's more because of Morial.
I think you still got, put it this way, an uptown candidate has to prove a hell of a lot before he picks up downtown votes. That still exists. I think some of the ethnic groups still have difficulty attracting other ethnic votes. I think, I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as it was at one point in time, but there were certain jobs which Italians could never get elected to before. That's changing, if not completely. At least when we were kids, had more to do with their stands on racial issues than on other matters. And to a large extent, that has diminished completely because there's been a big blur in terms of racial issues. Where, no smart politician is going to do anything that is obviously offensive to blacks. They're far more sensitized now than they used to be. They don't survive very long.
And a black candidate running citywide has to appeal to white voters, so you get the cross, you get the mixture.
Well, let me ask you something. I mean, we're living in New York now, and New York just elected David Dinkins. Okay? And New Yorkers, of course, thinking they're the center of the universe, acted like this is like a major thing, and I guess it is for New York. But New Orleans has had black mayors now for 13 years, and a lot of people in city government are black. Does that mean now that we have a totally integrated power structure? I mean, New Orleans is now, some ideal, not ideal, but things are really just great over here?
No, well, politically we might be all right, but economically we still have some major problems, and that has not been integrated. And I guess that's when I talked to you earlier about my business approach to some of these questions, is that I've always believed that you've got to have the economics to work for you too. And we did it. We put the economics with our political base, and that's why we got different people elected. Now we've got to go back and get the people in our district economically satisfied or in a position where they now can hold on to what they have. We've got to change the economy of the city. We've got to make it grow. We inherited certain things when they become bankrupt. And I don't believe Dinkins is going to have, I think he's going to have a similar problem in New York. He's a black man, but he's got financial problems out there. And it happens almost in every case. When blacks do get elected to positions, that office is economically bankrupt. And then we have to deliver even more because we've got to work with less. And in New Orleans right now, if we had another $100 million, as some other administrations had, we could, do a much better job. But we've got to do a lot more with a lot less.
The economic thing is the next threshold as far as I'm concerned, not only in New Orleans, but in almost every other city in this country. The country, period. I mean, all you have to do is look at the statistics and see what percentage of businesses are owned by blacks. It's minuscule. It's less than 1%, I would think.
Sure. And when Darryl was saying earlier about we came up during the period of time in the 60s and 70s where you had the federal monies involved with social programs, and it created, I guess, a black middle class, if you want to describe it that way. The federal government is now walking away from cities.
The battery, that's a really important point that we want to make. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you were saying about the way the power works.
So a quick survey of major businesses in this city would indicate virtually no black presence at all. I would dare say there are probably fewer black businesses, black-owned businesses today than there were 20 years ago.
Right, integration
Because of the legal integration cost the black restaurants, for example, and insurance companies and all this sort of stuff, it cost them their existence. But you look at the major bank boards in the city today.
No black members.
You're not gonna find any blacks on any of them, which is somewhat ridiculous because obviously they have large numbers of black customers. But
he who controls the purse controls the power. And even though we have the political power, we don't have the purse. And that's what I guess the 90s hopefully will bring. And it's going to have to come again through the federal government. Local government, state government just doesn't have it.
There's one other bright thing to look at. At one time, when you're on the mountaintop all alone, you can afford to be sloppy and arrogant and everything else. With increased competition from our Japanese friends, from our European friends, this country is going to have to get its act totally together. And just this political shotgun wedding that we've effectuated in certain areas of American society, urban, doesn't really translate on the state level yet, barely at all on the national level as of yet. You have no blacks in the Senate. You got a handful of blacks in Congress. No black, well, one black governor, one, in a southern state too. So things are looking up. I would think between now and the turn of the century, if we have as much progress as we've had between 1965 and 1990, 25 years, maybe the next 25 years.
We'll see economic integration.
We're doing a program about the entire state. We're also trying to get perceptions of different parts of the state. We've heard from a number of North Louisianans about what they think about the politics and the politicians in this part of the state. You find that a lot of national reporters will write about Louisiana and they'll fly into New Orleans, and they never get around to writing very much about North Louisiana. Why do you think that is?
Not as colorful.
There's nothing going on up there. There's nothing going
Who
on
wants
up
to
there.
go to Mamua?
I mean, Shreveport is a suburb of Dallas. No,
And Monroe, where's Monroe? Isn't that a president?
No, in all seriousness, one of the biggest disservices that I believe done to the citizens of Louisiana is the lack of a north-south highway, okay? It is a big vacuum. As a matter of fact, the vertical link is in Mississippi, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Now, there's no vertical link in Louisiana. We just have two bands going through the state. Mm-hmm. And there is a dire need for either a toll road or a new interstate highway connecting the north and the south, because it's easier to get from, so much easier for us to get from here to Houston than it is to get from here to Shreveport. It's ridiculous. And might as well have two separate states. They don't have much of an opportunity to come down here, and our people don't have much of an opportunity to see how beautiful some parts of northern Louisiana actually are. When I was in the Senate, one of the things I had embarked upon was a real hard look at the state park system. Because having seen some of the parks that have been developed in Alabama and Tennessee and some of the other states, I thought it would be very, very prudent and wise for us to develop top-notch resort-type parks in upstate Louisiana where the topography really allows for it, where you got nice hills and plenty pine trees and lakes and all the rest of it, with the goal being to try to encourage more Louisiana citizens to spend their vacations in the state of Louisiana and to spend their dollars in Louisiana and to get to go to nice places in upstate Louisiana for a reasonable amount of money and spend a week's vacation and find out what the people up there are all about, who also were in need of a rejuvenated economy because the agrarian thing has just started kind of disintegrating. I thought more tourism would be a logical kind of shot for them.
But isn't it like oil and water? I mean, they tend to be, especially the whites up there, extremely conservative. We're Baptist.
More Baptist, yeah, and we're more Catholic.
We've got a lot of conservative whites in the city of New Orleans and in Metro Orleans for certain.
But the metro, I think, we got the only metropolitan city in
The only
the
metropolitan
front area in the state. And I guess that makes a big difference. They don't quite understand the problems here.
But it's getting there. Look, cable television, I swear, you know, the world has gotten to be such, the only thing we're really missing right now in terms of nexity is a damn highway. I think if we really, because the electronically, we're living in the same world now, and anybody with a cable TV set that turns on headline news, CNN, is aware of what's happening in urban America. PBS does a great job. I mean, but to physically encounter people is difficult. It costs a fortune to fly from here to Shreveport.
Sure.
And if you try to take it on the highway, you're going to spend a good 6 hours, and nobody's too anxious to do that.
Let me ask you something about something that seems to unite the entire state. We have a lot of colorful people in politics in the state.
Yes, you do.
For a lot of people that are from outside the state, they look at, let's say, Edwin Evers, and they see the gambling trips, and they see the stories about his personal life, and they go, what is going on in Louisiana? How does a guy like that get elected? And we've got, reams and reams of people that are very colorful. How do you explain the appeal of colorful politicians in the state?
Well, they're doing a story about Earl K.
Blaze?
Yeah, Earl K.
Blaze?
I think the guys delivered. They've, the Long family's always delivered to poor people, even though the family themselves, I guess, got wealthy. Edwards delivered to his constituency, and as long as he delivered with they thought he should politically, he could get reelected.
I think there's several.
He's a good administrator.
Several things.
Yeah, Edwards was a good administrator.
You
The
have
Longs were good.
the ethnic background, at least in southern Louisiana, heavy French, heavy Spanish, African, emotional people. No one ever accused the French or Spanish of being dull. They're always emotional people mixed in with the African. The whole mixture is one big gumbo. So, I mean, you that's for starters. Couple that with a political system that was always financed by a third entity, a la Big Oil. When politicians can deliver the bacon without taxing their constituents too much, in this case at a ridiculously low level for many, many years, the public tends to allow those politicians to do anything they want to do without getting uptight about it because the bills are being paid and everything's taken care of. Educational system, a highway system, except for north-south, a charity hospital system, textbooks. Louisiana, under the Long legacy, was very progressive in a populistic fashion. And again, when you don't have to pay for it, then you can afford to be entertained. Sure. And when you couple that with the ethnicity and the cultural background of the people themselves, you know, most elected bodies very well represent the people that elected them. I used to, you know, I was constantly amazed by that on the state level. You could pretty much listen to a guy make a speech and not even know his name and say what part of the state he was from, because he was a perfect reflection of those people. He thought the way they thought, he talked the way they thought. And you look at the Louisiana legislature as far back as the Civil War, was a target of tourist promoters who would organize river excursions in St. Louis and other cities with the highlight of the trip being watching the Louisiana legislature in session for a couple of hours. I mean, the greatest show on earth.
And gambling has always been
Always part of it,
South
sure.
Louisiana. You had lottery, not as the lottery you have in New York, but you had lottery vendors, and you had gambling. You had private clubs where you could play cards or dice or what have you. So the fact that the governor goes to Vegas,
Yeah.
you know,
What's unusual about
what's unusual about it? A lot of bingo. Churches have big bingo games. It's not as shocking to us that we've got someone that would enjoy a game of chance occasionally.
Do you ever find yourself explaining to out-of-state friends what what it's like down here politically?
Yeah, I've been asked that a number of times. Although even before I got involved with politics, it's always been, you know, whenever you say New Orleans, it was, you know, it's a little twinkle in somebody's eye, and it's because it is a little different, and it's the gumbo aspect of it. We have a little bit of everything here, and people like it. We like it, and I think we like to talk about it. And I can even remember going to Japan, and the Japanese didn't know where Louisiana was, but they knew where New Orleans was.
If you had to complete a sentence saying Louisiana politics is, could you start that sentence and complete it for me?
I think we keep saying it's a gumbo.
Yeah, that's the
It's
best.
a mixture of everything. It's a little filet, a little shrimp.
You remember, I don't know, Gillis used to use the line, I think maybe Liebling, A.J. Liebling started it. Louisiana is the westernmost Arab Sultanate and northernmost banana republic. It is a big milieu. It is a gumbo. It is spice and everything nice. It's just les bon ton roulé. The Big Easy. I mean, can you imagine having a city known as the Big Easy?
And even the districts. I mean, if you look at our areas, you get the mixtures. I remember when I first ran, my headquarters was on Elysian Fields in the lakefront, and it ran from the river to the lake. And I'd get my lessons from Jim Duffy from the time I leave the headquarters at Elysian Field until I got to the historic district, 5 to 7 minute ride. I'd get a quick rundown on the types of wood I needed to preserve, and cypress and the blinds and, you know, preservation. When the lakefront was brand new construction, I was running into a district. Part of my district was historic areas. So I went from rich to poor, middle class, historic areas, some slum areas that needed to be taken care of. I've got 4 institutions of higher learning. I've got Dillard University, which is a private institution. I got a UNO, Southern University. I got the Baptist Theological Seminary. You know. Got Catholic churches and Baptist churches, almost one in every block and a ballroom in every corner. So we got a mixture of all of it, even in the little districts. And I think part of my campaign was based on that, microcosm of the city of New Orleans. So you got it mixed not only in the city, but you got it mixed in the districts.
Okay. Now let's get some, we need like 20 seconds of no noise to get the room noise.
And while you're doing this, if there's anything you want to add, you can be thinking about it.
Okay?
Great.